Thank you very much. Thank you really, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity, and thank you to Bemcon and all the sponsors for creating this opportunity. I feel honored and blessed to be among such an amazing concentration of talent just in one room. I've been given the task to give the first lecture, and that, trust me, is not easy. I have to warm up the engine, but let's see how we're going to do that. I'm going to talk about the subject, which generally is quite technical and can be pretty boring, to be honest. And I'm going to try to make it as enjoyable as we can, and hopefully you are going to help me do that. So the topic I'm going to introduce to you is the adoption of Six Sigma methods in food sector, a continuous improvement approach to food safety. Now, important to say, this is not going to be a course about Six Sigma. We are course for that. It's not also a course about food safety. It's really a dive in a reflection on how can we inspire ourselves from the Six Sigma methods and methodology that has really created a phenomenal growth in the industries and created a huge competitive advantage for companies that do adopt it, and how that can also serve the cause of food safety. So, without keeping you waiting too long, let's talk about why this topic is even being discussed. How relevant is it? And how much has been said about it? And I like to always start with a couple of quotations. So I went on for a research looking for what is being said on the subject. And trust me, even with Google, it was quite difficult to even find articles, paper on this specific. I'm not saying there's nothing about food safety in the food sector, Six Sigma in the food sectors, but Six Sigma in relationship with food safety, definitely. We all talk about profitability, how to improve yield, etc., but not really food safety. So interestingly enough, in 2006, the Food Safety magazine had this article that almost went out unnoticed, where they were actually saying, bridging quality control gap. What they feel as a quality control gap, there seems to be a gap between quality functions in the businesses and the rest of the organization. Why? They're saying how Six Sigma can increase plant, food safety, and profitability. And these two are too often seen at odds. Like if we're going to invest in food safety, we're definitely going to lose in profitability. The same year in June, the FDA, the US Food and Drug Administration, issued the guidelines for risk assessment for the food sector. So everybody will be thinking, Hassan, right? Well, out of the 5 tools or methodology they are introducing people to, companies to, in order to identify and mitigate food risk, Hassan is there, but all the other 4 belong to the Six Sigma package of methodology. So that's quite impressive to see that many tools related to Six Sigma for food safety in the Food and Drug Administration. The Global Food Safety Resource also, who's a leading educational and training hub, introduced another article the same year of how to improve your process with Lean Six Sigma. I did find a paper, and that paper was in 2014, where the application of the FMEA, right, you see that in the FDA guidelines, for audit of HACCP systems was introduced. There was a research paper, very well documented, that was published back then, led by Joanna Trapole. Another research paper in 2015, the adoption of Food Safety Modernization Act. I think most of you are aware that in the US they have a new Food Safety Modernization Act, and it's just a matter of time before the rest of the world start to adopt there, where they more aggressively push companies to abide by food safety standards, to be more preventive, more open, more transparent. It's a real challenge. If you talk to colleagues in the US, it is an absolute challenge they're facing today. And they are introducing how Six Sigma approach and risk-based preventive control could help the small food facility, which are definitely struggling in the new US regulation. So that's just the tone, right? Now, there's an interesting column by someone I like to follow, and he is a ASQ fellow, Mark River. He comes from a pharmaceutical background and has dived into reliability study and food safety as well. And his column in 2020 was making FMEA more robust with HACCP. Right? How can we utilize HACCP to make FMEA? That's curious. Now, they're thinking how they can use HACCP, our HACCP, and make their FMEA, the Six Sigma FMEA, more robust. So that led me to think, what about the other way around? Why, if we're sharing, it should be two ways. How can we use FMEA to make HACCP more robust as well, right? Last but not the least is 2021. We're talking now about pandemic, almost, right? That's where we are. Beyond HACCP and preventive control. And it says, promoting true risk-based thinking by public health. Meaning, and the whole article, if you read it, you go online and read those articles, it talks about Six Sigma. It's how Six Sigma could be one of the tools that company could use in order to really be up themselves and prevent food safety risks, knowing how public health is sensitive. And the chairman said it, post-pandemic, with the pandemic, everybody's worried about their health, everybody's sensitive to food safety, and how also the combination of social media can make a difference. Okay. That being said, let's get into the product of the month again. How many of you know Six Sigma? Right. And generally when you ask the question, a lot of people say we know. Yeah, we know. A lot of people know. Okay, the next question is, how many of you practice Six Sigma in your daily work? And generally, it's a smaller portion of people doing that. And that's what people are preaching. How can you bridge between that knowledge and the work you do? And that requires innovation, creativity. So you need to rethink your own work, not waiting for someone to rewrite the job description. But you have to really reimagine yourself. Six Sigma is a method that combines a set of tools, right, that have been developed in order to improve businesses. And that was introduced back in the 80s in Motorola. Since then, it has evolved fantastically with so many new tools and adapting, so it's really evolving technological technique. Six Sigma projects follow two project methodology, and the most known is DMake, but there's something else than DMake, maybe more powerful than DMake, right? And they're all inspired by the PDCA, we know of Dr. Edwards. DMake is used for improving existing business processes, right? And the DFSS, designed for Six Sigma, is for processes that you want to build or modify. And you can see here, there's a quick chart from the ASQ, Society of Quality, in their handbooks. You will find this. So if there's an existing process, well, DMake, right? And if not, it's DFSS. And Six Sigma is not being now. Of course, this may look scary, but if you look at the DFSS, it has a huge range of steps and so many flexibility, so it's not one thing. There's so many ways depending on what you're looking for. Enhancing a product, changing a product, etc. I did say it was not a process. Six Sigma, so I'm going to move on to talking about the DMake. What is the DMake approach? Well, it's define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Right? Now, define is always a very difficult thing. And I think also, when it comes to food safety, it's particularly a very interesting thing. And I think even investing in training ourselves in utilizing the define method can really help in the case of food safety. Why? It's about talking the language of the business. What's the language of business, right? Money, right? And when it comes to money, us food safety guys tend not to be done. Why should we do this? Because regulations say. Why? Because the standard says. There's no money there, right? So it's all about how can we use approach like cost of quality to break down and get the numbers. Not to run away from the numbers, but when you embrace this, you're really able to make the case, and there's so many ways to do it. If you've got a complaint, you should multiply it. If it's in Twitter, well, there are studies that show that you can multiply it by 10,000, and how much that's going to affect your business, and so forth. So there's so many ways to actually document the cost of the, and have a number tag on the risk, and that's very important. So just to define is insert something which you can find insightful. Then you have the measure phase, another optimize phase, improve and control. And most importantly, you have a set of tools that are all there, and we're not going to go through all of them, but we're just going to pick some example just to get a taste and the feeling of how powerful these tools can be when you utilize them. Okay, now, lean is not Six Sigma. A lot of food companies are utilizing lean. But you see, the things there in purple and red, that's lean. It's just some tools, 5S, etc. Six Sigma is the whole methodology from D to the C. So we talked about DFS is my favorite. It's really one that is not well known. But when you are developing a product, you want to start with the design phase, as you know. You want quality to be designed in the product. You want food safety to be designed in the product. And this methodology really helps you to do that. There's so many other things. I just encourage you to document yourself. It's not easy to find your way out of all these methods, right? But there are very good handbooks. I will give some reference at the end that can help out with this. So moving on to the next component, which is HACCP. Okay? So the HACCP, as you all know, is the core methodology utilized to tackle food safety, recognized by the Codex, recognized by the ISO committee. So HACCP is HACCP. There's no food safety without HACCP. That's a recognized method, right? So it's only fair that we try to see how Six Sigma can enhance our HACCP methodology. Now, HACCP has steps also, right? And Six Sigma has steps, so they do have some commonality, right? Let's look deeper now. In the DNA, you see the define phase and identify, right? And that really speaks to the HACCP methodology, where you need to define the usage of the product, define who your customers are, the ingredient, and identify. So you really need to do that as well. And you have the measure phase, where you also need to understand your process. What are the steps? What is the product going through? Is there a heating process, a drying process? Basically understanding your process. And then, of course, you analyze, which is the hazard analysis that we do. You analyze the level of risk, what are the hazard, how severe, how likely, etc. And based on that, you identify control, right? And sometimes you need to improve in order to get the controls. And in the end, you have a control plan, which speaks with the C of the control. So, well, technically, they're pretty much aligned right already. So that should make things easier for the rest of the now, of course, how do we go by it? And again, keep in mind, selecting one of these tools in Six Sigma depends on is the process existing or not, and we're going to see that. So, let's talk about FMEA 2006. The FDA is saying utilize FMEA. So how can we utilize that? So the FMEA actually follows the logic, which is define the scope of work, define the ground rules of assumptions, right? And then create a starting point, block diagram, parameters, identify the failure mode, meaning how it's going to impact the customer or the business, right? Perform failure effect cause analysis, identify the preventative and detection method, assign severity ranking, and conduct critical analysis. Well, for food safety, they're speaking our language so far. Moving on. Now, how do we match this, right? Well, interestingly enough, you can see that when it comes to analyzing the hazard, starting from there and identifying the hazard, there is an opportunity to utilize the FMEA, and we're going to talk about why. It's really not about, do I use FMEA or do I use HACCP? No. It's really about how can I combine both? How can I benefit from both? Right? And when I do that, you need to understand the cycle that you're going through in your HACCP. Yes, because HACCP needs to be updated, right? So in your HACCP cycle, you can see where you have opportunities for FMEA, right? FMEA methodology, which is when you need to reevaluate the risk, when you have changes in the product, etc. Mark did say that in 2020, making FMEA more robust than HACCP, I say, let's see how we can make HACCP more obvious with FMEA. And to do that, we have an opportunity to connect FMEA to customer satisfaction, HACCP to customer satisfaction. Full safety, HACCP, FMEA, customer and business, customer satisfaction. So in one table, you get everything there, right? So it's not only salmonella is going to cause sickness. No, it's more than just that. You have salmonella, yes, sickness, but then you can have an open session with the rest of the business. Marketing, what do you think this sickness is going to cause? What do you think the reputational cost is going to be? What do you think, you see? So FMEA actually allows you, right, not only to isolate the risk, right, the hazard, but it also allows you to invite your colleagues, the rest of the business, to contribute as to what's going to be the impact on the business. And when you do so, you have a fantastic tool to align with the rest of the business and the business strategy, and to demonstrate in one table how your HACCP plan is going to help the business strategy. Now, the classic HACCP, as you know, you identify material, product, etc. Then what are the hazard, physical, biological, etc. And then you have a likelihood and severity. Then you need to justify assumptions. We have controls, etc. So you guys do that. The FMEA talks about how it's going to act. And you have seen some examples, right? Salmon receiving, you have exposure to chemical. Okay, so what? Well, contaminant of the product. What is the potential for failure cause? You see, and then you go on and on and on. Now, if you only stop with severity and occurrence, which is basically likelihood, right? You have a classic HACCP. There's one important thing that is added here, is the detection. So FMEA adds that factor. How good are you to detect? Before jumping and saying that we're just going to monitor it, how good is your system to actually pick up this failure? And how likely are you to miss it? So that will determine the impact of the business. Another interesting thing with FMEA is that it allows also to review and project, right? Okay, we put all this control. How is the business going to look like? What is the residual risk? What happens next? So you are actually able to anticipate. If we implement 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we get this. That's a fantastic tool. Why? Because those controls not only connect to preventing the food safety risk, but immediately here your management can see, well, if we invest in this food safety control, temperature control, metal detector, etc., we are actually going to also impact 1, 2, 3, 4 other 5. Right. So you're really making the case not only for food safety, but how food safety helps the business. So basically, I like to think of it that way. HACCP is good, but hey, if you just add the tools of FMEA, you just might be able to get things better. And most importantly, you get everyone on board. You don't need to say, hey, you have a HACCP session, okay. Why this quality? Right? You want to change that paradigm. You really want to change the narrative in the company. You want to make sure people understand you are part of the business. You just want the business to be as profitable as they do. They're just missing part of the picture. You want them to see. So there was a study published, and I encourage you really to read it, by Digitalizer International. They're all about data. They were doing food safety, and they say, hey, food safety, FMEA, what's going on there? And they say a system that would allow HACCP, FMEA to be developed in parallel, would allow manufacturing to aim to the highest standard of food safety. That is quite a mistake. Okay, so we decided we want to give it a try at that. So we had our an issue. How can we, work on a couple of products that we're trying to put on the market, and we're having some early spoilage issues, right? So it was classical demake, right? Method. What do? Well, we defined the why. What was that why? Shelf life, right? Shelf life. That's pretty much the why. Right? And then we have some X's. What are the parameters? So this is just giving you an example, so we don't walk away and say, hey, that was theory, but how can you utilize it, right? You have bacterial contamination, right? And you have packaging, techniques, you know, vacuum, non-vacuum, etc., or even the packaging itself contaminated. You have free water also. So sometimes you need to add some kind of brine, some kind of something to trap the water so it doesn't allow bacteria to develop. So these were the excess. You can then go for root cause, right? Ishikawa is not only good for root cause, it really allows you to structure your mind. So for each one of these excesses, what are the processes that can either contribute positively or negatively? Okay? What are the processes? So you have disinfection, what is impact, what is impact the material. We have cooling, oh, that's impacting the temperature. So you list all the processes there, right? And then you put them in a very nice categorical table. From here, you do your FMEA. So we did the FMEA in order to understand what was for each one of these processes linked to the parameters where we are. Detection, occurrence, likelihood, past complaints, past issues, data, etc. So it really requires time, but it really pays off. Doing so allows you to then rank them for criticality. You remember sometimes we say FMECA, criticality, right? And you have the big picture. What is really the biggest risk you have? What should you tackle quickly? Then moving to the action. Then you move to the action plan, right? Where you already identify the processes. So it's not difficult to assign this to process owners at the end of the day. And you ask the process owners to literally just focus on their actions and to contribute. When we did this is what we did. That's what we call in Six Sigma a breakthrough. So up there you had the way it was before, losses, you know, issues, right? And now. So that reduction is what we call breakthrough in Six Sigma. So that's an actual project that we ran, and we actually saved the company quite saving them the company money, saying here under the surveillance of my colleagues here, was a big part of a narrative to make everybody understand food safety is not against you. Food safety is the work. We are not like the government agent inside the government agent who's inside the company, right? I see people smiling. But we are here for the business, and there's a win-win situation that we can manage. Okay, other tools, I'm just going to gloss them over quickly, are control charts. So, usually, these data are already in the company, right? They're there. You have check sheet, you know, washing of the hands, 1, 2, 3, number of defects, 1, 2, 3, number. So you have check sheets, you have graphs, temperature graphs, pH graph, those are there, right? But how can you utilize them to control? It's difficult to see this, you know. How can people utilize it? Something called visual management in Six Sigma that you can actually utilize. And this is visual management, right? You can actually utilize the same data but put them in a control chart. And these control charts allow you to tell a story. You can actually see throughout time, is there a trend? Is it a one-off? Am I trending? So if you see this one here, for example, you want to ask yourself, do I want to do something here? Yeah, I want to do something. Why should I wait until it reaches there, right? But if you look at the classic asset, it has a limit. And if the limit is not breached, well, there's no corrective action, right? So that's not much of a preventive, right? There's another level of prevention that you could actually utilize if you actually utilize this method. So, temperature control, sanitizing level, bacteria count, pH measures, any critical parameters can be plotted and controlled. You can detect change, anticipate deviation, human factor. You can actually know if two shifts are not giving the same output and understand what's going on. And sometimes when you ask production people will say, oh yeah, we had this new guy joining now, but we're training him. So you weren't there, but you could tell the story from here. So keeping an eye on this dashboard would really help. Connected to this control chart, you can actually also convert that into what we call a capability study. So you can actually study your system and understand, are you capable of meeting the requirement? Now, why is that so useful? Well, new critical limits can be defined, right? New regulatory limit. Let's say there's a new regulation limit. how confident are you that your existing system is able to? And if you don't comply, how much are you not complying with in terms of percentage? How much are you outside of the law? So that capability study are very good tool, statistical tool to be able to understand that, and they also help you anticipate deviation, unit control, etc. Just like that. Another important thing is the probability distribution, right? So if you don't have enough data, few samples, and you say, okay, I want 100 samples, and your management is like, analysis cost, okay, right? So how do you change the paradigm? How do you change that? Because you're seen as the one who's just getting us to have so many samples, and you know what's really a problem is when all the samples come negative. And everybody's looking at you and like, why did we even invest in this, right? You can change the narrative by utilizing probability distribution, which requires a limited amount of samples in set condition, and use probability projection in order to have a very good level of confidence as to how your system is going to behave. And that's a very important tool, right? So again, you convert your graph, utilize it, and you get something like this. So discrete variables, discrete variable extrapolation from samples, confidence level, pH measures, any critical parameters again can work with that. You reduce the time and effort it takes you to give an answer. Remember time, low quality, food safety. Can we put the product in the market? We need 1 month study, that's too long. We can't wait for that. How do you cope with this, right? So Six Sigma offers solutions in order for you to squeeze the time it takes you in order to answer those questions and allow quick management decision, but reliable management decision. We're very good companies. Almost last but not least is an application of the monitoring theory. So we used to have something that looks like this chart here. Okay, don't consider the green. The green is the good guy. It looks like this, and these were total bacterial counts, right? And we were looking at total bacterial count, etc. So you have the mean, right? Which doesn't mean much. See? So I want to show you here, if you just go with average, you get the wrong picture. The red is the average, right? Average. Mean amounts, this is your average. But this is the distribution. So the average is not really a good indicator right here. But what do you do this now? You want to compare all these processes, right? So we produce the product this way, and that way, and this way, and I want to compare which one is the best way. And you have something like this, and what do you do about it? Well, this is what distribution allows you to do. It allows you to really overlap the distribution curve, right? Be able to have a full picture because you project the probability calculation, the missing link and the missing samples, and you can actually make a judgment call here and identify when do I have the best result. And the last one is the hypothesis testing. It's one of the most difficult part of Lean Six Sigma, but it is absolutely important. It allows you to really tell if you have differences. So you look at this, and if I tell you which one is the best, are they the same? It's difficult to tell, right? Hypothesis testing gives you, depending on the amount of samples you took, how much confident you can be, and you set, right, the confidence level, and you can validate. So when it comes to validation of improvement, validation of controls, hypothesis testing is your friend. You can really utilize it to validate the before improvement, the after improvement, the before the control and after the control, and you can document if it works or not. You can also document supplier's performance. The supplier gives you a new machine, and you can say, hey, this machine is not comparable to the previous machine, or there's something wrong, so you can really have open discussion on these topics here. How do we conclude something like this? Let me see. So I borrowed some of the takeaway I have from this fantastic article about reading the quality control guide. It says something like this: in order for food safety professional to preserve a value perceived position, how can you be perceived as valuable in the company, right? We have to understand the business. Oh, he's a food safety professional, so he's really sympathizing with us. We also must be able to make and support business decisions, right? We must always be ethical and legal conscious. We're not going to be independent result trying to cut corners, right? When food safety is being encroached upon to deliver business results, that is our credo as food safety professionals, right? But it seems like this principle should be understood by now. But when managing a complicated process within expensive supply chains, under extreme pressure to exceed cost reduction, this is our time, right? Targets, we must continue to remind our peers and executive teams that food safety is a mandatory prerequisite to the business model. Why? Because all business deliverable, of all of those deliverables, it is the most noticeable when it is absent. So if it's there, people think, okay, why are we talking about food safety? We're selling, right? The minute it's not there, complaints, treaters, etc., shut down the plant. So that's the one that you don't want to miss. I have here some literature that you can look into related to Six Sigma and as a whole, the certified quality engineer also, and they also have certification schemes. So I really encourage you to go into it. It would be really an eye-opener for a lot. The practical engineering process and reliability statistic is absolutely a good book for beginners, and a very good reference because it really has examples of how you can utilize it in your day-to-day. That said, I'd like to thank you and thank you for your attention to this presentation and